So as someone who does a lot of work doing trainings on transgendered and transsexual issues, it's always best to start with a little bit of terminology. People often get confused about the difference between transgender and transsexual, so we'll start there. They are very similar. In fact, in some parts of North America, the words are used interchangeably. Here in Toronto, we do tend to use them to mean two different things. Transsexual tends to be a person who has made the choice to live consistently as the opposite sex. Now, how they live that is up to them. That may include surgeries, it may include hormones, it may include changing hair or styles of dress, but none of those things are what make the person transsexual. What makes them transsexual is that it's a consistent lived identity. A transgendered person, the way that we use that term here, tends to be someone who is living more fluidly between genders, exploring gender as something sometimes creatively or artistically. Maybe they're a drag performer. Sometimes they're someone who believes that they're a third gender, neither male nor female, or they may see it as being both male and female. So that's what transgender is as opposed to transsexual. For the purposes of this document, I'm probably going to use the word gender variant quite a bit. We use the term gender variant to describe children or youth who are expressing gender differences, different than, say, their peers. We don't use the word transgender or transsexual to describe those kids because transgender and transsexual are about identities. All we're describing in these kids is a behavior. So we're not trying to say that we know what their identity is or that we know who they are. We're just saying that they exhibit a behavior. So that's when we use the word gender variant. There's a lot of things that I would like teachers to know about gender variance in students that they might have. It's hard to know where to start, honestly. I think one of the most important things is this, to say that a child exhibiting gender variant behaviors, dressing the way that a person from the opposite sex would dress, engaging in activities that a person from the opposite sex would engage in, those things do not necessarily mean that that child is going to grow up to be transgendered or transsexual. It's normal to explore gender. It's normal for children to explore all sorts of things about their universe. This is just one more piece. It's only recently that there has been more allowance for kids to explore that openly. Previously, kids explored it, but they did it in the privacy of their home. And now they're starting to explore it more publicly. But again, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be transgendered or transsexual. It just means that they're taking the opportunity to figure out who they are in the world and what gender means to them, and they'll come to their own conclusions. Some kids who explore gender variance behaviors are straight when they grow up. Straight men, straight women. Some of them will be gay men or gay women. Some of them will be bisexual people. And some of them will be transgender or transsexual. Some other things that I think are really important for teachers to know. It's really hard for a child who is exploring gender to take the courageous stand of saying to their parents, I want to go to school today dressed like a girl, or I want to go to school today and use a different name. It's even more courageous for that child to show up at school in front of all their peers and in front of their teachers and their principals and ask people to respect those choices, those new names, those new identities. I think that we sometimes want to protect kids from the harassment and the discrimination that might fall upon them as a result of those choices. But it can be really easy to confuse that harassment and discrimination with the choice itself being a bad choice. The choice isn't a bad choice. It's that we live in a society that stigmatizes people with variant gender behaviors. But the behaviors themselves aren't bad or wrong. So what teachers need to do, and what parents need to do, is to understand the courage that that took for that child, and help them to understand that, I think this is a message for kids in many, many different circumstances, but the message is you're okay even when the world thinks you're not, right? That's a really key message for every kid to hear, and kids who are gender variant need to hear that as well. And they need to learn how to deal with the discrimination and the harassment that they're probably going to face from their peers. So teachers can do things to try to intercede, and that's incredibly important as well. One thing that a teacher could do is to role model for the other students how to behave respectfully towards a gender variant child. They can role model using the right name and using the right pronouns, and they can role model treating that child like any other kid in the school, and recognizing that they still have skills and abilities and talents, and that they still have the same sense of humor, and that they're still the same person, they're just using a different name. When teachers role model those kinds of things, it makes it easier for the other students to understand what they're supposed to do and how they're supposed to react, because sometimes they don't know. Teachers will also need to jump in at the first signs of intolerance, the discrimination, the harassment that probably is going to start. They need to jump in immediately to let kids know this is not acceptable. We won't allow that here, and you will be disciplined if you attempt to, bully a child because they're gender variant. Again, that sends a message that's very clear. It sends a message not just to the student who is doing the bullying, that bullying is wrong, it also sends a really important message to the child who's being bullied, that no, we value you, and we don't want anyone to hurt you because we know that you deserve better. And that might be a message that they need to hear at that time in their life. Yeah, there are definitely some suggestions that I would have for teachers. Thinking back on my own experience, one is a lot of kids may feel that it's kind of an all or nothing. If they're thinking about, cross-dressing and using a different name, having different pronouns used, and the whole thing, they want it all at once. And a teacher might want to suggest to a student that they go with half measures to start with, to get comfortable. Start with using a different name, but instead of going with a name that is recognizably the opposite sex name, pick a name that's gender neutral. Something like Chris, Sam, Pat. That gives the student a chance to grow into the experience. It also gives the other students a bit more time to get a handle on what's going on. So that's something that a teacher could suggest. Another thing that I think is really important, and this is directly from my own experience, is that kids who are struggling with gender might show some of the same signs and symptoms of distress that kids show for other experiences. I know that I had teachers who thought that perhaps I was being abused because of the signals that I was sending out, the issues that I was struggling with, but they had no clue what it was. So, things like changing grades and withdrawal from peers, substance use, which sometimes begins very early these days, missing classes, all of those kinds of things can be indicators that a child is struggling with these issues. So it's something to keep in the back of your head that even if it's not the kid that you think it might be, who would be the one most likely to cross-dress, this person could be wanting to as well, or feeling at odds with their body. It can happen in any student. It's not easy to tell. There are friends of mine who are now transsexual women who were the high school jocks in their schools and had all the girls and did all the cool jock things, but inside they felt like a completely different person, and they felt like maybe if they just did this properly, that maybe they would begin to believe it for themselves. It was a mask, and lots of kids can be wearing those masks, and so you just never know. Language and terminology are always important when discussing issues of puberty in classrooms. I think that I mean, first of all, the issue of just inclusion, of making sure that you include trans people or gender variant behaviors into the discussion, that you bring it up. For instance, with puberty, bodies change. And as you're discussing how bodies change and how different kids may be experiencing some feelings, difficult feelings around how their bodies are changing, trans kids or kids who are going to be gender variant are also maybe experiencing difficulties with how their body's changing. And so you can raise that at that point and mention that this is a normal part of puberty for those kids. A couple of other things that I just wanted to mention. One is that I think it's really important for the teacher. We talked earlier about the teacher's role in this. Another role that I think a teacher has is to take the onus off of the gender variant child for explaining gender variance and explaining trans identities. It's hard enough for that child to be living that life without trying to justify it, explain about it, teach about it. So that's the teacher's role, to learn, and what they don't know, they can be honest about that. You know, well, I'm not sure about this, but I'll try to find out. Maybe they bring in guest speakers who can speak from personal experience. Again, to shift the attention away from the gender variant child to someone else who is gender variant that the kids can focus their questions to, and that person can give those kinds of answers. I think that's a useful tool as well.